Let's perhaps start with Iran, which I think it's worth saying is not a regime that is likely to be subject to the doctrine of nuclear deterrence. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction is what prevents people with nuclear bombs from initiating a first strike, because they worry that in the counterstrike they will be eliminated. So it's a very strong doctrine that even though there are nuclear weapons in the world, we have not yet, thankfully, been subject to a nuclear holocaust. So why do I say that the regime in Tehran is not subject to that mutually assured destruction doctrine? The reason is because they're religious fanatics. They believe that they have absolute truth, many of them in the regime, and that anyone who disagrees with them, by implication, are infidels, and moreover, they glorify martyrdom. They believe that if they can take out infidels, they will go through a door into heaven and be blessed for eternity. I might have mentioned in the previous podcast that my father was born as a Shia Muslim. Most of his family are moderates, as are many Muslims around the world, but there are a few that are fundamentalists and believed that my father was an apostate and that he deserved to die. I've looked people like this in the eyes and I know that they are implacable. In those circumstances, in fact, one other bit of context, if I may briefly, I was 10 years old when the Iraq-Iran war ignited, and for obvious reasons I took quite a deep interest in that war. And a lot of people don't seem to know about the 20,000 child martyrs who were indoctrinated by the fanatics and the clerics who took over after the 79 revolution to believe that the greatest duty they could perform for Allah was to walk and sometimes run into minefields and up against machine gun fire to clear a path for the adult military coming in behind. And they died, their limbs strewn across battlefields, and they were then glorified in government propaganda, held up as icons of the revolution. And young people, and I've got 10, 11 and 12-year-old children, are so influenceable, impressionable. And the fact that the people who are supposed to protect them indoctrinated them into what is effectively a death cult seems to me very good evidence, in addition to all the more contemporaneous stuff, the repression of women, the killing of people who are homosexual, the funding of genocidal proxies that are committed to the elimination of Israel, tells me that if they got a nuclear weapon, it is likely they would use it. Let's not forget Ahmadinejad said that Israel was a scourge that should be wiped from the pages of history. The supreme leader called it a cancer. And I could envision an aging, fanatical leader initiating a first strike and then looking at the radar screen and seeing the inevitable response in which that person would die and thinking, I am closer to Allah. I don't think that that is true of Vladimir Putin. I don't think Putin is prepared to die for his ideology. He's a venal, corrupt leader of the old school. He's worth billions. He had a Black Sea palace. He's got a young girlfriend. He wants to live. I think the same is true of the North Korean leader, with his harem and his looted opulence. It is not true of religious fundamentalists who glorify martyrdom. And that's a long first answer, but that is why I think, even though I have severe reservations about what Israel has done in Gaza, very, very severe reservation, we can talk about it.
We will.
I do really want to say that when they operationalize against the regime in Iran, not the people of Iran, 70% of people in Iran hate the regime. They've been immiserated. GDP per capita is like $4,000 compared to $50,000 plus in Israel, a progressive, capitalist, free society. I think right-minded people should support them, given what we know about uranium enrichment.
Well, that's where I was going to go next, because I see a lot of people who haven't looked into this, or perhaps who have, making the argument that, look, this is just another regime change war. We've heard all these arguments before. This is just like Iraq. It's WMD. They don't have a nuclear weapon. This is just Israel using the opportunity to go after somebody they've been wanting to go after for a long time. So what is, lay out your concerns about the nuclear weapons program.
It's categorically different. I opposed the war in Iraq. I thought Afghanistan was probably a mistake because I don't think we had a clear idea of what would happen to either of these places after an invasion. The CIA thought that Iraq would welcome democracy, it would become a Jeffersonian liberal state, not realizing the deep clan divisions in Iraq would almost certainly lead to civil war, notwithstanding the Sunni Shia divisions. So I can understand why people are concerned, as am I, and probably you, about what might happen if the regime falls in Iran. However, the counterfactual here is nuclear weapons, potentially 9 or 10 nuclear devices being held by a millenarian cult that is committed to the destruction of Israel and calls America the Great Satan. Remember what I said earlier, a nuclear war of that kind, even if it occurred between Israel and Iran, would kill hundreds of millions of people around the world. It's why I find the American First doctrine sensible doctrine in many ways, but you have intricate global supply chains around the world, which furnishes America with all of the material wealth that they've grown accustomed to. They're not isolated from what will happen there. Neither are they from what's happening in Ukraine. But a nuclear war would be catastrophic. And so in those circumstances, I do think that this is different. It's an order of magnitude, 2 orders of magnitude different to either Iraq or Afghanistan.
But what's the evidence is what people will say. Because, if it's just Benjamin Netanyahu saying they're close to getting nuclear weapons, that's not persuasive to a lot of people.
Well, you will have read, I think, probably the International Atomic Energy
I'm just getting you to say it.
No, sure. Okay, so I can see I'm doing all the work. But I did read it in full. It's a 20-odd page document. And you will know that these are effectively, civil servants who are paid to inspect and offer a point of view. And obviously they have incentives too, do they not? They don't want to miss Iran's building of a nuclear weapon and then be blamed in the future for one of the great calamities to have befallen the earth. Neither do they want to be, if we do invade and they haven't got quite as close as we had thought with the WMD in Iraq, they don't want to be held responsible for that. So I think you read it in full, think about what their incentives are, and then try and get a sense of what they're really trying to say. And I invite anyone to read it, because I think they'll come to the same conclusion that I did, which is that Iran, they say explicitly, are in breach of their obligations and non-nuclear proliferation, that they have been deceiving and dissembling for a very long time, and that they can't account for some of the enriched uranium that they think Iran has made. I think what they're telling us is that Iran, this is a big, complex country with complex terrain. I think what they're saying is they can't discount the possibility that they're reasonably close. How we define imminent is probably quite difficult, but in those circumstances, I can certainly see why Israel, with the air defenses down, with what they've done with Hezbollah, taking this opportunity to try and get rid of that threat once and for all.
Matthew, there is a clip that is doing the rounds of Tulsi Gabbard, who's head of national security under the Trump administration, on the 25th of March, addressing the Senate, saying that Iran did not have nuclear weapons.
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon